I came to the hospital thinking it was a consultation, just a conversation. But the moment I walked into the room and saw the clipboard in Silas's hands, I knew better. Talia was already standing her posture tight, too ready. The doctor greeted me with polite certainty. "We appreciate you being willing, Mrs. Quinn. Your son said you're prepared to proceed." I blinked. Proceed with what? Silas didn't look at me. "The donation, Mom. They're scheduling the prep." Talia smiled like it was a favor. "We just need you to sign. It's already set up." I stared at the folder in her hands, then back at them. "No one asked me." She laughed lightly, brittle. "You're her grandmother." I didn't answer. My hands were still on my coat buttons when Talia stepped forward and tore my medical file in half. "You're letting her die," she screamed. People in the lobby turned. A receptionist froze mid-keystroke. Silas stood, his voice colder than I remembered. "God, Mom, don't be such a selfish old woman." That one landed, but not how they expected. I bent down, gathered what pages I could. They weren't just lab results. They were evidence of me, of the part they'd decided didn't matter anymore. I stood without flinching. This is not how you ask, but they weren't asking. They were assigning. I walked out of that room slower than I wanted, but steady. Because what they didn't know was that I already had the answer, and I had it in writing. Silas was 6 when his father died. I still remember the sound of his breathing in the dark that first night after the funeral, tight, shallow, as if afraid the world might forget to keep spinning if he stopped inhaling. I made promises then, silent ones, that he'd never feel alone, never feel lacking. I kept everyone. I took the early shift at the library and the late shift shelving books at the campus bookstore. I skipped meals, let shoes go one winter longer than they should, and I said no to things I wanted so he could have what he needed. I told myself that was motherhood. When he got into UNC, I cried in the hallway alone so he wouldn't see. I cashed in a retirement bond to pay the deposit. When his student loans piled up, I co-signed. When he wanted to buy a house, I offered part of my savings for the down payment. I didn't hesitate. Love, I believed, wasn't measured in what you kept, but in what you gave without keeping score. Talia came into the picture with soft curls and careful thank yous. She brought wine on Sundays and complimented my banana bread. It felt like family, or something close enough. But after Aurelia was born, the visits slowed. Then they stopped altogether. I told myself they were busy. First steps, daycare, new job. But months turned to years, and my calls went unanswered more often than not. I sent birthday gifts. I mailed cards. The silence grew teeth. Then 3 months ago, Silas called out of nowhere. His voice was thick. "Aurelia's sick," he said. "We need to talk." Need. That word again. And now here we were. Not a family reunion, a requisition. Suddenly, all those things I gave without keeping score felt like items on an invisible invoice they were finally ready to collect. Except now, the price was blood. Tissue. Organ. I had always thought love was limitless, but somewhere along the way, my kindness became currency. And now the account had come due. I reached into my handbag, pulled out the envelope I'd sealed quietly weeks ago. Inside it, the test result. Stamped, dated. I wasn't a match. I had known for a while, and so had they if they'd bothered to look. I took the test before anyone asked. The same week Silas called to say Aurelia was sick, I went to the clinic on my own. No conversation, no drama. Just a quiet decision made in the same way I used to pack his lunches. Practical, invisible. 5 days later, the result arrived. I wasn't a match. Not even close. I didn't say anything. I saved the email in a folder labeled medical and told myself it would be enough when the time came, that they'd ask, I'd tell them, and reason would guide the rest. But reason wasn't part of their plan. When Talia started talking, like everything was set in stone, that I'd already agreed that I had no reason not to, something in me shifted. I opened my laptop and pulled up the original result. Then I forwarded it to Marta. Her reply came quickly. Let's start a paper trail. I gathered everything. The lab summary appointment logs my signed intake form. I didn't need to explain anything to Marta. She'd seen this kind of maneuvering before, just never aimed at me. I was still attaching files when another email landed in my inbox. Hospital intake records. Listed under my name, marked first-time evaluation. They were rewriting the timeline. Pretending I hadn't already tested. Pretending they didn't already know. Talia had filled out that form. She'd received the same email I did. But she chose to erase it. They weren't just ignoring my result. They were hoping I wouldn't remember it either. They forgot I save everything. Dr. Weller didn't look like someone who enjoyed conflict, but something about his eyes told me he wasn't afraid of it either. He called me back to his office after the incident in the consultation room. Said he wanted to verify a few things for accuracy. His tone was careful, clipped almost clinical, but I caught the flicker of unease behind his glasses. I noticed an inconsistency in your donor file. He began tapping the screen with a pen. It states this is your first compatibility screening. But another result dated 3 months ago is already in the system. I nodded once. That was me. I submitted it on my own back in February. He glanced at me, then back at the screen. The result was issued to an email listed as Coraline Quinn 22. Talia's, I murmured. He stopped. She's listed as your emergency contact. That's why the results were auto-sent to her. She knew, I whispered. She knew all along. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was heavy. He didn't try to fill it. I want a printed copy, I said, stamped and dated, everything from that original test. Chain of custody, email logs, whatever you can provide. He nodded. I'll prepare it myself. Give me 10 minutes. When he stepped out, I stood and moved toward the window. From here, I could just see the roof of the pediatric wing. Somewhere in there, Aurelia was sleeping or pretending to. I didn't know what she'd been told, or how much she understood, but I knew this wasn't about her anymore. They didn't want a donor. They wanted a hostage, a body that couldn't say no, a name they could drag forward without argument. I opened my phone and texted Marta. Confirmed. She received the results. Print copies coming. Her reply came instantly. Start writing everything down. Even the silences. Especially the silences. Dr. Weller returned moments later with a folder in his hands. He placed it gently on the desk. It's all there, he said. I reached for it with steady fingers, the weight of it familiar now. They're going to come back, I said quietly. He looked at me and didn't argue, didn't advise calm, just said, then you'll be ready. It wasn't until later that afternoon that Dr. Weller called again. I need you to come back, he said over the phone. There's something else. I returned to his office, the same quiet room with its gray-blue walls and the faint smell of old paper and sanitizer. He didn't sit this time. Just pulled up a file on his screen and turned it toward me. This was submitted to the hospital administration 2 weeks ago, he said. Medical power of attorney. It authorizes the transplant team to proceed with evaluation and preparation. My name was at the top. So was a signature at the bottom. But not mine. I studied it closely. The loop of the Q in Quinn was exaggerated theatrical. My own was tighter, neater, written by someone who signs grocery lists, not stage performances. Whoever did this knew the shape of my name, not the weight of it. I didn't sign this. I didn't think so, he replied. It doesn't match your intake forms or your original test paperwork. We've already flagged it internally. They submitted this knowing I'd already been ruled out. Yes, he said. It appears so. I pressed my lips together, willing myself to stay calm. It wasn't rage that filled me. It was something colder, deeper. Not shock. Confirmation. I want a notarized copy, I said. You'll have it by this evening. I walked out of the office, clutching the second folder like a ledger. The weight felt heavier than the first. Not just lies, fraud. Back at my apartment, I called Marta. She didn't answer, but when I texted her a photo of the forged document, she called within a minute. "They've crossed a line," she said. "You ready to put this on record?" "I already am." We spent the next 2 hours drafting a formal affidavit. Every date, every email, every signature I did and didn't give. She helped me write it without metaphor, without anger, just facts. We knew this wouldn't be the last push. If they ever come back, she said, we push back with paper. I saved a copy in 3 places. Printed 2. One for me, one for the ethics board. Then I sat down at my kitchen table and read it all again, not because I doubted any part of it, but because I wanted to remember what it felt like to reclaim something they thought they owned. And sure enough, before the sun set, I heard the knock I'd been waiting for. They found me near the east corridor in the quiet wing where no one raises their voice and everything echoes twice. Talia's heels struck the floor first. Sharp, deliberate. Silas followed, carrying a clipboard that I recognized before it was fully visible. "Mom," he started, breathless but controlled. "We just need one signature. That's it." I didn't stop walking, but I slowed, just enough to make it clear I wasn't running. Talia slid into step beside me, holding out the clipboard like an offering or a trap. This version clears everything. It's streamlined. Just initials and a signature. "No." Her expression hardened. "You said you cared about Aurelia." "I do," I said, turning to face them fully. "But I won't be manipulated into pretending consent." Silas exhaled sharply. "This isn't manipulation. This is family." "No," I said again, quiet but anchored. "This is coercion. And I have the documents to prove it." Talia's jaw twitched. "We're trying to save her life." "You're trying to save your narrative." That's when Silas stepped forward and grabbed my wrist. Not hard, but firm. Familiar in a way that made my stomach drop. "Don't do this," he said, low and urgent. I didn't pull away. I didn't flinch. I just looked him straight in the eye and said, "Touch me again, and I will call security. I have proof now. Forged documents, prior results, dated files." Behind him, a nurse rounded the corner. She caught his hand on my wrist. Her steps slowed. She didn't speak, but she didn't turn away either. Silas released me. Talia moved to intercept my path again, but the nurse stepped forward slightly enough to block her angle. It was subtle, but clear. I adjusted my bag, straightened my back. "I'm leaving," I said. "If you stop me again, I'll file charges for attempted medical coercion." "You're making this about you," Talia spat. "I'm protecting myself," I replied. "Something no one else here seems willing to do." The nurse gave me a nod. I walked past them without hurry. I didn't look back. My feet felt grounded, steady, more certain than they had in weeks. They hadn't expected me to show up with facts. They expected guilt, silence, compliance. But I wasn't afraid of disappointing them anymore. I walked until the hallway turned left, and there, just beyond the elevator bank, I saw the man I didn't expect Dr. Weller holding another folder. Dr. Weller closed the door gently behind us, then pulled the blinds. "There's something you need to see," he said, holding out the folder. "We reran everything." I took the chair across from him and waited. I didn't ask what it was. My hands stayed still in my lap. Fingers folded like I'd done 100 times during parent-teacher meetings, medical briefings, grief counseling. "There's no biological link," he said quietly. "None. Not partial, not distant, not maternal. You're not related to Aurelia." I stared at the folder without opening it. "We tested twice," he continued. "The original compatibility screen flagged something unusual, so I ordered a verification panel." I nodded, slow, deliberate. "Did she?" he started, then paused, correcting himself. "Did Talia ever tell you Aurelia was adopted?" I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. No, she used your name on the intake, said you were the maternal grandmother. Was it Silas's name on the birth certificate? He hesitated. Yes, but based on the sample provided and the parentage reports even, that may be questionable. The lab flagged inconsistencies. Of course they did. I didn't cry. There was nothing left to mourn. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the beige paint of the wall behind him. So much effort had gone into making that room feel neutral. But truth doesn't care about soft lighting or clean edges. I smiled, not with warmth, with clarity. Cold and clean. I want full documentation, I said. All results. Every version. All timestamps. You'll have them by this afternoon. He didn't ask if I was okay. He knew not to. As I stood to leave, I caught my reflection in the glass of the framed diploma on the wall. I didn't look smaller. I didn't look shattered. They had spent years building a version of family where I was a footnote, but they forgot one thing. I know how to read the fine print, and I know how to publish the truth. They called it a community gratitude ceremony. Folded chairs, a podium, a banner printed in soft tones of blue and green. Talia stood center stage, flanked by Silas and a hospital administrator who looked like he regretted showing up. We are deeply thankful. Talia said into the microphone, her voice calm, rehearsed, perfect. Thanks to an anonymous donor, our daughter Aurelia is recovering well. Anonymous. I stood at the back of the room, barely inside the frame, holding my phone steady. They hadn't invited me, hadn't acknowledged me. Not once. Behind them, a live video feed showed Aurelia in her bed, smiling faintly. My image didn't exist in this version of the story. Not even a name. Not even a glance. When the applause faded and the crowd dispersed, I waited by the side hallway. Talia stepped out, first phone in hand, still glowing from the spotlight. You knew I was here, I said. She didn't flinch. You forfeited the right to be part of this family. I held up my phone screen, still recording. You just erased me on camera. Her hand moved fast, striking the phone from my grasp. It hit the floor with a crack that echoed down the corridor. Heads turned. A nurse rushed over. Everything all right here? She asked, eyes shifting between us. I bent down, picked up the fractured screen, and looked at Talia. Her chest rose and fell. Quickly, her voice tight with rage. You want to ruin everything. I shook my head. No, you already did that. Then I turned to the nurse and held up what remained of the phone. Please log this as evidence, I said. I'll be filing a complaint with the ethics board today. The nurse nodded. And just like that, the applause from inside the conference room became background noise, because outside those walls, the real story had already begun. The press room was half empty when I walked in, but the cameras were still rolling. Some of the mics were hot. Enough. I stepped up to the podium and opened the folder. No preamble, no apology. My name is Eudora Quinn, I said. You didn't hear that name yesterday, but it matters. I held up the first sheet. This is my compatibility test, dated February 3rd. It states I am not a match for Aurelia Quinn. Another page. This is a power of attorney filed without my consent. Forged. Submitted by my daughter-in-law. Another. And this is a signed statement from the hospital confirming that both documents were withheld and falsified. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I was brought here under the false assumption that I could save someone. Someone who, as it turns out, isn't biologically connected to me in any way. I was never a match, and she was never my granddaughter. There was no reaction for a beat. Then murmurs, a few gasps, cameras flashing faster now. I heard the noise before I turned. Coraline Talia had fainted in her seat. A reporter stood halfway up shouting a question I didn't catch. I didn't stop. I stepped off the stage folder still in my hands and walked past the rows of folding chairs and stunned faces. No one followed. No one dared. Outside, the air was cooler than I remembered, and I finally let my shoulders fall. But the story wasn't finished. Not yet. She asked to meet at the hospital garden. South Path. Late afternoon. I almost didn't go, but curiosity, or maybe something older, pulled me there. Aurelia was seated on a bench beneath a sycamore hoodie, pulled over her head, hospital socks peeking out from beneath the hem of her sweats. She didn't stand when I approached. Just looked up. I always wondered, she said quietly. They only kept you in case I needed something. I didn't respond. I thought maybe you didn't know, but part of me figured you did. Deep down? I didn't know I said, but I felt it. Every year. She nodded slow. Not guilty, just resigned. I'm not asking for forgiveness. Good, I said, because I'm not offering it. A small wind stirred the leaves. She didn't flinch. Neither did I. I do hope I added that you find something better than this, because what they did to you, what they did to me, it doesn't deserve to follow us. Her eyes didn't soften, but they didn't harden either. We sat there not as family, not as enemies. Just two people untangling a knot someone else tied. I left first. Didn't say goodbye, didn't look back. The next morning, I walked into the county clerk's office and filed the paperwork myself. Power of attorney revoked. Emergency contact removed. Silas Quinn's name erased from every document with a signature that was finally, unmistakably, mine. It came 2 days after the press conference. No return address. Just a postmark from Missouri and a name I didn't recognize. The handwriting was careful, each line pressed gently into the paper, like the writer was afraid to take up too much space. I saw your video, it began. I'm 17. I live with my aunt and uncle. I didn't know I could say no either. No story. No plea for help. Just that. I read the letter 3 times before folding it along its original crease. There was no need to respond. This wasn't a question. It was a recognition. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk, the one labeled evidence, then hesitated. Instead, I placed the letter in the other drawer, the one marked keepsakes, next to a pressed flower from my mother's garden, and a photo of me at 20, smiling with my library ID in hand. Because this wasn't proof of harm. It was proof that something had shifted. I closed the drawer and stood walking to the window. The air outside was cool again. A gentle breeze lifted the curtain. I left it open. That night, for the first time in years, I didn't fall asleep scanning for the next request, the next guilt-laced favor, the next withheld affection disguised as duty. I simply slept. Not because everything was fixed, but because I finally believed the story wasn't theirs to finish. It was mine.